of all, before I start, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for voting. Thank you so much. I know people that I had to drag somebody that wasn't registered to register. So good job, everybody. We really, the turnout was unheard of. So to all of you who voted, thank you. So hi, I'm Stephanie Lucas. I'm Trust Design Rep at LinkedIn. I have worked at LinkedIn for, about 9 years now. And actually, side note to Joe, I'm a super big fan of privacy and a big privacy nerd as well. I've only worked in the trust product of LinkedIn for about 6 years, but it rapidly, as soon as I touched it, it became the part of the product that I wanted to invest myself in, and I've never looked back. So I'm actually now the trust design rep, so I help consult with teams on that, and I will tell you more about that before we're done. So let's talk about the importance of ethics principles framework, and actually why it's good business and how we built it. So I don't know if everybody recognizes this image, but this is one of my favorite ethics parables of all time. This is Horton Hatches the Egg. This is Horton the Elephant. It's a Dr. Seuss book. Hopefully you've all had a chance to enjoy it, and maybe it's worth taking another look at it, because it's actually a really great story, and I think a lot of adults could learn from it too. But it's basically Horton the Elephant. He has a friend who's a bird named Maisie. That's his friend, and Maisie has one egg in her nest, and she is sitting on the nest and trying to hatch the egg, and she kind of reaches the breaking point. She's like, I've got to get out of here. I want to break. I want a quick getaway. And she talks to Horton and says, I need a break. I'll be right back, but can you just watch my egg while I'm gone? And Horton says, of course, because Horton's a very good friend and he's got a good heart. And he promises he will sit on this egg until she gets back, which was supposed to be just in a couple of days, but it ends up being months. And Horton finds out that he's kind of gotten the raw end of this bargain, but he still stays on that egg through rain and snow. He gets kidnapped by hunters and sold to the circus, and he still stays on that egg right to the end. And his sort of mantra that he says throughout the book is, I meant what I said what I meant, an elephant's faithful 100%. And this is, this lone voice for ethics parable that, it really stuck with me. I never forgot it. This is what happens when somebody knows what's right. They stand up for it. And they want to, they have a conscience. So as designers, my drumbeat is that we are optimistic people. And I don't know if everybody on this call is a designer. Maybe you're a product partner, product manager. Maybe you're just looking to get into design or into products. Either way, probably you're doing this because you think you can do products that make people's lives better, right? Like we'd like to believe we would be Horton. We would sit on that egg through all of that because we know what's right and we're going to fight for it. And we are being told externally from all of the design community that you have to fight for what's right. Well, but the reality is that we work in our day-to-day in a universe that thrives on and rewards one thing, and that's shipping, right? Shipping is the thing that impacts your compensation, your recognition, and not shipping, throwing up obstacle to shipping could result in making things really unpleasant for you, and potentially, maybe even impact your job security. So there's that kind of tension there that makes the lone voice, kind of model it just not scalable. Everybody, let's just say we have a bunch of different Hortons. Different Hortons are going to have different lenses for how they look at ethics, and that makes your conversations about your product decisions just messy and inefficient. And a lot of times expediency wins out. And expediency, of course, as we know, can lead to some unfortunate product decisions. And we've seen, and Joe was talking about this too, we've seen the results of not thinking things through, of not thinking about unintended consequences, unintended harms, and look at what some of the things that we've encountered just over like the last 4 years. We were long overdue in addressing accessibility. The Me Too movement was something that was phenomenally painful for a lot of people. Cambridge Analytica, of course, goes without saying. Gamergate. I don't know if everybody remembers Gamergate. A lot of online bullying there. Online harassment, and then conspiracy theories, things that impact elections, societies, and now we're even seeing, it impacts broad public health policy. So I'd like to talk about the importance of principles and why they can make this whole thing a little more focused and a little more efficient, and get you to the right place more often than not in an easier way. So there's 4 photos here of things that you may or may not recognize what they are, but humankind has recognized for millennia that having a set of principles, a set of rules to help guide you navigate decision making are kind of gotta have it. Upper left is a Hippocratic oath. The doctors that take that says it's a lot, but the memorable part is, first do no harm. Upper right, purportedly a photo of 10 Commandments. Lower left, the Geneva Conventions. Lower right, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Both of those last 2 were artifacts of humanity wanting to remedy the atrocities of World War II. But more recent example, if you're familiar with this crew, most of you probably are friends in the Star Trek verse. And of course, if you've watched much of the show, you know that they have the Prime Directive, right? So every time they have a decision, make a tricky thing to solve for, that Prime Directive, when they land on that planet, that Prime Directive is always in the back of their head. They know some smart people got together, they figured out, here's the thing that's the most important, and this is basically of the Starfleet guidances, this is the principal one that says you don't interfere with the normal course of life and evolution on a given planet. Okay, so the one of the points I'd like to make here are that principles are more than just doing good. They are actually they can be part of a business strategy too, and they are at LinkedIn. We've integrated trust quite a lot into product decisions that we're making, because it's super important. But principles can establish a culture of ethics and responsibility. And again, remember, go back to the Star Trek guys. They land on the planet. They've got the Prime Directive in their head. They understand. There's going to be a point where we make a decision. Here's the right way to go. It's been decided. You don't have to use your gut anymore. They also create a consistent pathway to good features. You're all aligned to a set of principles. You're all more likely to be making kind of the more similar kind of decisions. And they also minimize conflict, uncertainty, and escalations. Like if again, go back to the multiple Hortons, like people are arguing what is in the best interest of our user, right? Having a huge network is the best interest, obviously. Well, maybe it's not, So this is what I'm just beginning to talk about here when I say that it's a good business strategy. They're more than a promise. They shine a bright light on the way forward. And built correctly, principles can make ethics promises both actionable and imperative. It's one thing to say, here's our sort of lofty idea of what goodness is. In order for quick, teams that are moving quickly to use these to apply this, it has to be actionable. In order for you to have sway on this in your conversations, it has to be imperative. Ethical companies, whether a company is seen as ethical is starting to really matter. This is a page from a report, or a quote from a report from Industry Week, which is actually that published a report by this company Ethisphere that defines and measures corporate ethics. And in this one quote I pulled out, that today employees, consumers, and stakeholders value companies that show a commitment to business integrity. I think we can all imagine how an image of poor ethics or poor integrity can, in fact, not only hurt your brand image, but also your employer image, your employer brand, whether or not people are, falling all over themselves to work for you, or having to make rationales if they decide to work for you at all. It does matter. People are really paying attention to ethics and responsibility right now. And so this is just a little bit of an arrow to have in your quiver when having these conversations about building a set of principles. So let's look at some high profile companies that are applying ethics frameworks principles right now. The first one I'll talk about briefly is Salesforce. So they have a really robust team dedicated to AI ethics. I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out yet, but they have a really great website called Einstein.ai. This is the website dedicated to their AI ethics team, and it's quite mainstream and accessible. It gets technical in some parts, but mostly it's just talking about how they aspire to really fulfill the promise of ethics with the AI tools that they build. So they have this framework of principles for their teams that are building tools. And this is the imperative part, and the actionable part, that the tools must be responsible, accountable, transparent, empowering, and inclusive. And you can start to see in these words that they start to focus. They start to focus the lens. Each one of them is not lofty. It's becomes, each one of these words is something that you can lead into a conversation. Accountability is you can see where a conversation about accountability would go, and transparency and inclusiveness. Like these are a little bit more defined. They have on their homepage of the AI site, of the ethics site, this quote. This is a partial quote, but we believe the benefits of AI should be accessible to everyone, but it is not enough to deliver only the technological capabilities. We also have an important responsibility to ensure that AI is safe and inclusive for all. And if anybody's been paying attention, you know that AI has a phenomenal amount of power and potential, and also a tremendous capability for harm if it's not used correctly, for excluding people, and for other harm, and for potentially, all kinds of other things having to do with law enforcement and that kind of thing. So this is how they're addressing building AI tools. Moving on to Airbnb, they have an internal mission statement called "Help." That says, "Help create a world where you can belong anywhere." Now, this isn't really technically a framework, but from what I understand from listening to people talk about it, it actually, this particular mission statement has been very instrumental in guiding product decisions, something that it's agreed upon and people can point to. If there was an interview with Alex Schliffler, Chief Design Officer, who I think is transitioning out of that role, if I'm not mistaken. But he says in his interview with InDesign Up, it's a podcast interview from, I think, about 3 years ago. It's really great to have that as a guiding principle, as a North Star, because it keeps the company focused. And there was other kind of remarks about, and anecdotes about people saying, that having that that vision statement helps guide their conversations to, maybe shelve an idea versus for the sake, something comes in for the sake of innovation, you decide maybe it's just not aligned or not. And then lastly, Microsoft. Microsoft has been a really inspiring leader in terms of building inclusivity and accessibility into their products. If you've seen the Super Bowl ad, they did a fantastic ad about a young boy who could use a video game because they had outfitted it for to make it accessible. So they have principles shown here: recognize exclusion, solve for one, extend to many, learn from diversity. these are, you can see for the solve for one, extend to many, there's an ROI benefit statement right there. There's a business benefit statement right there. And of course, this one principle has been repeated a lot in terms of accessibility conversations. But you can see, you solve for one, you extend to many. You're already doing something that is going to enhance your marketability as a business. So there are principles kind of embedded here. They have a really great website. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, please do. It's great. They have all these resources. They have this whole kind of illustration about the spectrums of lack of accessibility or ableness. Please check it out. This is what they're doing here is they're creating this resource for and it's open source, like everybody can use it. It's not just for their designers to help them make smart decisions, but it's being a proponent for it to the community of design to help everybody start rethinking how they think about inclusivity and accessible design. Okay, so that's that. So let's talk about LinkedIn. So we have over 700 million members, and we call them members. Our users we call them members. If you hear me drop a member reference, that's what I'm talking about. And like I said, I've worked there for 9 years, and we understand, kind of like Airbnb, and I didn't mention this on the Airbnb slide, but for them and for us, trust isn't just a good thing to do and doing the right thing. It's existential, right? So the framework I'm going to talk about was specifically for trust. And when people come to LinkedIn, their livelihoods are involved. I mean, their boss could be watching them. Their clients could be watching them. I'm not trying to freak people out about using LinkedIn, but please do if you want to. But I'm saying is that we understand we have a huge responsibility for every part of our product to have trust built in. So about a year ago, a little over a year ago, actually, we started working on a trust framework. And we knew that in order for it to work, it was going to have some pretty fundamental requirements. It needed to be actionable. It needed to be collectively comprehensive and mutually exclusive. In other words, the universe of trust kind of represented in a decision-making framework. It has to be easy to remember, to be able to summon it up in the middle of an ad hoc product conversation. And it needed also, and this is important, it needed to be anchored by stated company values. In other words, it had to directly map up to our company's, trust principle, however it's expressed, it needs to align. So I've got some sort of like key points that we used in terms of building our framework, and I'm going to share them with you. And of course, keeping in mind, this is a big company, and so this is a big effort. And you may not be working for a big company, and you may need to think about this in a little bit smaller scope, and that's fine. And I'm perfectly happy to talk to you guys, to you folks after this, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, and if you need ideas and that kind of thing. But as far as how we did it at LinkedIn, the first point is we involve stakeholders from the get-go. This is really important. You can if you're having a design, ethical principles conversation, you have to invite your stakeholders, your engineers, your product managers, your legal people, research, everybody, because they're the ones that are going to, it hinges on their participation and their enthusiasm. They need to be part of it going in. So the first thing we did was we pulled quite a few partners together, product managers, data people, designers, and legal, like the whole gamut. And we went into a room for a few days, and we started talking about what trust is and what are trust breakers or trust builders, in the industry, by comparison or in our product. So we identified pain points. We actually created some kind of like a set of maybe 6 persona scenarios of people that are maybe a little more vulnerable, or people that are just different situations. In other words, not like a certain, like the typical product designer they're very sophisticated in tech, and they're young and everything like that. We had to think past that. So, and we were very open and honest. You've got to be super honest with yourself about where the trust breakers are in your product. We also did talk about what success looks like. Like how does this framework look in the wild? How is it going to be? How's it going to live? How's it going to? How are we going to get this through to our over 250 designers and make it easy for them to use it? Because we do want to make it easy. And also just talk about what is trust, right? Like we had to align on what trust means, because historically, when you think about you talk about trust in the product team, everybody's looking at the team that does sign in and settings and all of that stuff. That's not what we were talking about here. We're talking about trust in terms of using our product. So we kind of identified all these pain points and needs, and then we started mapping them into themes, and we sort of things like safety and accessibility and being able to report something and that kind of thing, like all the kind of different parts of trust. So then what we were going for was a way that we could pull these all together in a way that was memorable and actually resulted in a set of words. And so the next key is memorability through simplicity. And this is something that we believed from the beginning that we needed like a simple acronym, something that people could remember, but it actually stands for the categories of things that put together. If you look at a product strategy idea or a feature design with these and review it under all these four or five words, you've got a trustworthy product. So we were working on acronyms, and we sort of like kept moving the Post-it notes around and came up with an acronym that we thought was worth it. And then that leads us to the next key. This is hard, but you have to gut check and stress test it. Like you have your idea of this framework. It is just your authored framework unless you get it out and get a bunch of people pulling it apart and giving you feedback and poking holes in it. So that's what we did next. And we took our framework idea to our design-wide all hands, which we do every quarter. And we broke everybody out into table teams. And we said, give us, go for it. Find out where the gaps are. Find out, what's confusing. What would you have a problem? What are the good parts, or how would these be problematic for you in terms of having your conversations? And so we came back. They poked it apart. We came back. We started over again. We came up with RISE. So RISE is our trusted by design framework at LinkedIn. That was not the one we started with. The one we started with was I think STAR or something like that. And I honestly don't remember what the words were at this point. But the point is that we were willing to, throw it away and go back in the room with the Post-it notes and start over. And I'm telling you right now, it's really fun when you have a bunch of people looking at each other and going, I think we got it. That part is really magical. So what's RISE? Okay. So we decided, because we are a user experience design organization, we need to root our principles in the experience and how our members feel when they use LinkedIn. So in order for a product to be trustworthy, our members have to feel respected. That means that we never put our needs or business desires ahead of them. We put them first. Like we think about them in terms of instead of just, this is a really good example. Instead of just rolling a premium subscription forward, we give people ample notice, and we actually give them, we're continually letting them know when it expires. And we send them an email letting them know in plenty of time. So like we really, try to make it, make respect as an important part of the product. Informed, people know what, this is go back to what Joe was talking about. And there's always, we're still on a journey getting this exactly right. But what we're doing with our members' data, also, what is and is not okay on LinkedIn. This is something that's very top of mind right now, as you might imagine. And also, when they do a report, what can they expect? What's the status of the report? That all goes back into the informed bucket. Safe, that's pretty self-explanatory. We want to make sure that members feel safe and confident in using LinkedIn, and that there aren't other members that are going to harm them. And empowered, we want to give members what they need to successfully use the product and then stay out of their way. So last key is implementation. What you see right here, and again, this is a big company, big design organization, fast-moving design organization. So we need an infrastructure to make this work. Now, for a small organization, it's not this complex, but for us, this is where we're at. We have, the goal is trust, and all the designers that work at LinkedIn clearly understand that trust is not a box that some other team checks off on the product review. Trust is their job. Every single designer, trust is their responsibility. So we have the framework, and then we have the trust design rep. That's me. And I am there not to, despite my judgmental look in my photo there, I'm not there to admonish people. I'm there to help, because we are not going to succeed here unless we make this as easy as possible for designers to do what's right without slowing them down, because God knows designers have enough things to deal with without me standing over them with a yardstick tapping my hand impatiently. We want to help. We want to provide resources. So I've got a couple of workshops. One is called Red Team, Blue Team. I did an article about it. I'd be happy to share it. If you want to reach out to me, I can tell you more about that. It's about finding possibilities for harms by bad actors in your product by adopting the role of a bad actor. It's really fun, and it's got a lot of traction. So that's one. Another workshop called What Could Go Wrong, where we talk about unintended consequences. I have an office hours for check-ins with multiple people, like with legal, writing, design, and research. So we could talk about a feature idea from a trust perspective. I do a biweekly newsletter celebrating ramps that were trust forward. Like, yay, we're actually recognizing ethical products. So this is something that you need to actually do. And then research questions built in our research studies that have to do with trust. So what does success look like? Well, for me, it works when designers are empowered and they're not slowed down. And what's possible for you to you notice people recognizing and incentivizing ethical design. Again, this is a manifestation of your culture becoming a culture of responsible design. And this quote is something that Sarah Wachter-Becher said in a Q&A I was sitting in on, and I was asking her, I said, a colleague had said, how do you know when these processes are working? I said, well, Sarah, how do you know? She goes, you, as a designer, they're working when the questions you ask yourself naturally start to shift. So that's where you've turned that corner. When designers are starting to ask the questions, they do not have to go look at the manual. They understand naturally, organically, as they're designing that, wait, maybe I better think about what could go wrong, right? That's what we're after. And I've seen that happen in designer after designer after designer at LinkedIn. It's happening. It's a fantastic thing to see. So what actions you can take? Build enthusiasm, host a workshop. I mentioned red team, blue team, but something that's an activity that's going to start helping people have the light bulbs go on and go, maybe we need to think about this a little differently. Host a design sprint about how different persona scenarios experience your product. Start building stories around how responsible design can boost your company's future success. Create a movement, but find allies and build relationships with them. Maybe they're experiencing the same doubts that you're having, and maybe that you guys can work together to have start to grow maybe a talk community or something like that. And look to your company's stated values as a foundation to responsible design principles. So in closing, I just want to say that just to sort of throwback, remind you why this is a good business decision. Again, they establish a culture of ethics and responsibility. They create a consistent pathway to good features, and they minimize conflict, uncertainty, and escalations. I want to leave you with this thought that you're someone who, as a designer, you're someone that has impact on your products have impact. They can be good impact or bad. But you need to coming together and sort of defining design principles or responsible design principles. It's not just you shouting into the wind. You will have the wind at your back. So it's been a little over a year since we began this journey at LinkedIn, and I'm always saying that it isn't going to happen overnight. You need to be able to look back a year from now and see a sea change, and we are seeing that at LinkedIn. So I just want to say, be patient, be persistent, and reach out to me for any help and advice. I would love to talk to you. Thanks.